Okay, so this is the second part of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So just taking a look at some of the legal rights that are guaranteed by the Charter. And it says the Charter also protects the individual and ensures fairness during legal proceedings, particularly in criminal cases. The rights to habeas corpus, and that is the right to a hearing or the right to challenge being detained or held and to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, always recognized as part of our law, are now guaranteed in our Constitution. Okay, so one thing to note here is that it's actually because of the Charter in our Constitution rather than just an act of legislation. So no one can be deprived of the right to liberty and security of his or her person except through proper legal procedures. Canadians are protected against unreasonable searches and seizures and against police using excessive force, even when a search or seizure is authorized by law. We are also protected against being detained or arrested arbitrarily. In other words, a police officer must have a reasonable suspicion that we have committed a crime before holding us in custody. The Charter also protects us against arbitrary actions by law enforcement agencies. It guarantees our rights to be told why we are being arrested or detained, to consult a lawyer without delay, to be informed of this right, and to have a court determine quickly whether the detention is lawful. So at no time are we allowed to be held in this country or detained without knowing why we're being detained or for an unreasonable length of time and so on. So if you're charged with an offense under federal or provincial law, you also have the right to be told promptly of the offense, to be tried within a reasonable time, not to be compelled to testify at your own trial, to be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the evidential standard that's required in criminal cases in this country, beyond a reasonable doubt, in a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. You have the right to not be denied reasonable bail without cause. You also have the right not to be subjected to any cruel and unusual punishment, and not to be tried by a jury for serious charges, and to not be tried or punished twice for the same offense. Any witness, as well as the accused at a trial, has the right to an interpreter if he or she doesn't have or understand the language or is hearing impaired. Witnesses also have the right not to have incriminating evidence used against them in later proceedings. Again, equality rights. Everyone, regardless of race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical ability, is equal before the law and has equal protection and benefit of the law. This means that the laws and government programs such as pension plans must not be discriminatory. The Charter does not require that all people always have to be treated in exactly the same way. For example, it is constitutional to create special programs for individuals or programs who may be at a disadvantage in society, such as women, visible minorities, or people with disabilities. The Charter also establishes language rights, and it entrenches in our Constitution that English and French are Canada's official languages. Okay, minority language and educational rights in the predominantly English-speaking provinces and all the territories. Citizens whose mother tongue is French or who attended French language primary school or whose child has or is receiving primary or secondary school instruction in French have a constitutional right to send all their children to French language schools. Okay? And the same or the opposite would be in Quebec. Citizens who receive their primary education in English, being taught in English, have a constitutional right to send all their children to English language schools. Aboriginal rights, also entrenched in the Constitution. A number of provisions in the Charter and elsewhere in the Constitution specifically protect the rights of Aboriginal people. And the Aboriginal people in the Constitution are Indian, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada. So these provisions recognize and protect Aboriginal and treaty rights of Aboriginal peoples, and it helps Aboriginal people preserve their cultures, identities, customs, traditions, and languages. Okay, the Charter specifically states that the rights and freedoms it guarantees cannot be used to take away any rights that our Aboriginal peoples now have or may acquire in the future, for example, from the settlement of land claims. So what that means is that we cannot take away, let's say, uh, the charter right of preserving culture in exchange for settlement of land claims or so on. So we can't do that according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter does not embody all of our rights as Canadians, it only guarantees basic minimum rights. We all have other rights derived from federal, provincial, territory, international, and common law. So, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not our only source of law, but it does guarantee a basic minimum of rights that are entrenched in our Constitution, meaning that it trumps all other legislation. So, just to think about it, what you should do, and what I would like you to do, and this is not an assignment that you have to hand in, but in order to understand, and in order to further your understanding, is take a look at, and as a Canadian citizen, what are you guaranteed by the following Charter of Rights and Freedoms in these areas? So what is meant by fundamental freedoms? What do you have entrenched in our Constitution in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Same thing with democratic rights. What do you have? Mobility rights, legal rights, equality rights, language rights, minority language rights, educational rights, and Aboriginal rights. What are your rights and freedoms in these areas? Now, I think I had also another website here that you can go to. And if you do a search for Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it's this one, charterofrights.ca. And it comes up, and this actually website does a good job of explaining what the Charter says. If you look here, what it means, some case law that has been determined by the courts, so interpretation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It talks about some of the rights and freedoms that we discussed in this screencast, like democratic rights, mobility rights, legal rights, and so on. And then if you look at here, it also has some videos that you can play that will also explain the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That would be in addition to what I've provided to you, just to further your understanding. It's not necessarily a requirement, but if you need that to further your understanding, that would be something that I would look at. And again, making sure that it's clear in your mind about what these fundamental freedoms and rights are.